Friends, I have a plan. It took me a while to get settled. I'm actually currently up here in Wisconsin, where I'm at my family home, where I've got my mom, my dad, my 3 sisters, a dog, and 3 cats to keep me company out in this cabin in the woods. And it's taken me a little bit of time to get into a routine, to get settled, to figure out what we should be doing during this time, right? Because I think my first instinct was just to wait it out. My first instinct was just to say, let's just get through the next couple weeks and regroup when this is all over. But now that it's looking like it might be a longer period of time, I turned to the Lord and I said, Lord, what is it you want me to do during this time? What is it you want us, as we're preparing to receive the sacraments, to do during this time? And ironically now, all Catholics around the world are in the same boat as you. Just like you haven't been admitted to the Eucharistic feast yet, all of us are fasting from our Eucharistic feast, and together we'll all come back as one to receive from the Lord's table. What a beautiful day it'll be. Right now, as I've said, it's looking like it's going to be May 30th, Pentecost, or perhaps even the Vigil, so May 29th. Keep that weekend highlighted on your books. We're hoping that is when all of you will be received into the Catholic Church and be able to receive the sacraments, which have transformed so many lives now and before. But I have a plan. I have a plan to get us through this time, and the plan comes directly from the Lord. I was asking him, Jesus, what do you want us to do during this time? And yesterday morning, Sunday morning, when I was in prayer, the answer became so clear. Of course, during this time, we are going to do what all the great saints before us, what Jesus himself has done in times of crisis, in times when our exterior movements and routines and schedules are limited. What are we going to do? We're going to dive inward. In fact, we're going to spend the next few weeks or months, however long this takes, building an interior stronghold. And as a reminder that this interior stronghold is first and foremost built through prayer, I'm going to start now in the way that we always start class, with a reminder that there's another person in this conversation, that God is with us, and that he wants to be with every single one of you through this crisis. I'm sure, like me, you've read about 1,000 articles in the past week or so about the importance of having a set routine and schedule during this time, about setting aside spaces designated for work and sleep and eating. I want to remind you all during this time, don't forget to schedule in prayer. Don't forget to schedule in your time with Jesus, and don't forget to make a space where you can have that quiet time with the creator of the universe. What a special thing that is. So, to inspire us all about what this interior stronghold can do for our lives, I want to tell you a story. There's lots of stories I could have picked from. I could have chosen St. Teresa of Avila, who wrote an incredible book called The Interior Castle. I'm stealing her idea a little bit. And lived in a deep relationship with Jesus interiorly. She built this kingdom in her heart, though she moved very little during her lifetime. I'm not going to tell you about Teresa of Avila. I could tell you about Immaculée Ilibigasa, the survivor of the Rwandan genocide, who wrote an incredible book called Left to Tell. Her story has transformed millions of lives. I have little doubt that she'll one day be a saint, but I'm not going to tell you about Immaculée. I could also tell you about Cardinal Van Tuan, a Vietnamese captive, a prisoner for the faith. But even though his story is one of my favorites, I'm not going to tell you about Cardinal Van Tuan. Instead, I'm going to tell you about a simple Polish boy whose name was Max. Max grew up about 100 years ago, and as a young boy, he had a deep devotion to our Blessed Mother, the Virgin Mary. When he was 12, in fact, he was in prayer, and he had this vision of Mary coming to him. And Mary offered him 2 roses, a white rose and a red rose. And she asked him, would you accept this white rose of purity or this red rose of a martyrdom? And he said, I'll take both. When he became a young man, he started to live out that mission in his life. He became a religious brother and then a priest. So he was already living out that call to chastity, that purity, that white rose in his life. And he was sent out as a missionary to the eastern parts of our world. He went to Japan and created everywhere he went a legion of missionaries for Mary. He had a beautiful love for our mother, which I know is still a struggling point for a lot of you. But take heart, trust in the church, Christ's bride. Mary, just as she was that perfect mother to Jesus, wants to be a perfect mother to you. Max went all around the world telling people the same thing. But in the 1930s, he was called back to Poland. And in 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland, he decided to stay behind with a few of the other priests and brothers and use the monastery as a hospital for those wounded or sick during the war. Very quickly, the Nazis took over the city, and instead of signing a letter of agreement that would have allowed him to continue living as a peaceful German citizen, he refused to cooperate with the Nazis, and as a result was sent into the concentration camps with most of the rest of his town. While he was in the concentration camps in Auschwitz, he lived out of his interior stronghold, his deep, deep faith that he had spent his life building. And as a result, he was a remarkable man in the concentration camps. In fact, he was known not just to get by day to day in the concentration camps, he was actually living with joy in the midst of these dramatic, horrendous circumstances. Other prisoners knew he was a Catholic priest, knew his love for God, so they would sneak in tiny amounts of bread and wine with which he could celebrate the Mass. And these other prisoners would fast all day. They wouldn't take even the tiny rations they were given, even though they were already starving, so that when Max celebrated the Mass, they could have just Jesus and the Eucharist in their stomach and nothing else. And Max was encouraging a force of hope, a force of joy in the camps at this time, but he didn't make it that long. Within his first year in the camps, one prisoner escaped, and to deter other attempts at escape, all of the guards rounded up the entire camp. They made them stand in lines outside, and they chose at random 10 prisoners to die in place of the one man who had escaped. And they went around choosing, and they had chosen a couple when they finally came to this man named Francis, and they pointed at Francis and said, "You." Francis drops to his knees. He breaks out in tears and he cries out, "My wife, my children, I can't die, I need to live, my wife, my children." And Maximilian Kolbe, Max, in the back row, heard this and knew in that moment, knew from the depths of his interior mission, his interior stronghold, that this was the moment that his whole life had been pointing towards. This was the moment that God had created him for. So instead of hesitating, instead of reflecting on the misery of the situation, instead of reflecting on what it would do to save one life when thousands, millions were being killed, Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward. And this was something he could have been shot for right away. He could have been shot on the spot for moving without the permission of the guards, but for whatever reason, Max moved harmlessly up to the front of the crowd, unobstructed by anyone, and he came up to Francis in the guard and he said, "Hi there, I'm a Catholic priest. I have no wife, I have no children. I'd like you to take me instead of this man. Let this man live and take me instead into the starvation bunker." And for no real human reason, the guard said yes. The guard said, "Okay, Francis, you can live. Max, you're going to the bunker." And Francis actually lived for a very long time after that. He actually went around the world after getting out of the concentration camps, telling people what Max had done for him. He had an incredible impact on this one man's life, but not only this man, because right after that, the 10 prisoners, including Max, were taken into the starvation bunker. And the starvation bunker was one of the most miserable places in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Constantly, you're hearing from their moaning and cries of hopelessness. But when Max was in there with the other prisoners, the starvation bunker became a place of peace. And it wasn't a place of peace exteriorly. The peace had come from Max's interior stronghold, had come from Max's depth of relationship with God. And so, during the 2 weeks that he's in there with the other prisoners, in fact, the sounds coming from the starvation bunker were those of songs, those of hymns praising God. The sounds coming from the starvation bunker were those of encouragement, to have hope, to take heart, to press forward to our God. the starvation bunker, one of the most miserable places on the planet, became a place of peace, of joy, of hope, of faith. After 2 weeks, all of the other prisoners had died. Max had coached them all, encouraged them all as they walked into our Lord's arms. But Max was still alive. In fact, he was still in there, kneeling and praying, looking like he wasn't going to go anytime soon. And the guards needed the starvation bunker cleared for the next round of prisoners. So they opened it up and came in with a lethal injection of carbolic acid. Max didn't resist. Out of the fullness of his heart, he stretched out his left arm and waited calmly as they injected him with the medicine that was to kill him. He died and is recognized around the world today as Saint Maximilian Kolbe, a man of incredible faith, a man of incredible devotion to Mary, and a man who lived out of an interior depth that most of us can't even imagine, a depth of peace, of courage, of joy, of hope so strong that it was able to not only endure in the concentration camp of Auschwitz, but actually spread to the people around him in the concentration camp. And that, dear friends, is the sort of depth that I want to cultivate for all of us in these coming weeks. We are going to build with Maximilian Kolbe an interior stronghold, a place that's going to be formed primarily through prayer, through silence and reflection, and it's going to become for you a place of rest, a place when the world gets crazy, when everything's stressful and there's so many anxieties pressing in on your mind that you can retreat to and be at peace. It's also going to become a place out of which you can live with courage, from which you can recognize the voice of God in your life, and from which you can know when your moment has come, when your mission, when you're called to step out and do something incredible. So we're going to spend the next several weeks building this interior stronghold together, and I'm going to give you some options on how we're going to do it. With this video, I'll send out underneath a survey of how we're going to go about as a group building this interior stronghold. Maybe we'll do Zoom meetings where we can all interact with each other, where we can have a live class. Maybe I'll keep sending out videos, or maybe life is too crazy right now. We'll find some smaller way to make sure we're all still growing and learning together. But either way, no matter what we end up doing as a group, I want to make sure all of us together are doing something else as well. Last week, you should have gotten from me a package with the Nicene Creed in it. I hope you all got it. Please let me know if you didn't. But this week, I've just put in the mail this morning the Lord's Prayer. This is the next step in your growth, in your reception into the Catholic Church, is the memorization of the prayer that Jesus himself taught us. I can't imagine a better way to start off our building of an interior stronghold than with the Lord's Prayer. But in that packet, I've also included a little card that looks like this. This is a poorly made card using my first grade gluing skills. Those are a little rusty. I haven't used those in a while. But it's meant to be a card that can go on your fridge to remind you of an incredible thing we have going on at our parish right now. I don't just want you to have this group as a part of your community. I want you to engage with the whole St. Vincent's community. And right now, we're inviting the whole St. Vincent's community to join this Bible study with Father Hilton, Thursday nights at 7. The first installment of it, if you didn't already watch it, is on our website under the Habits of Happiness tab. I'll send out a link to that in this email too. But all of you are encouraged to grab a glass of wine if you're of age, cuddle up on the couch, bring a spouse if you have one, and watch Father Hilton guide us through the book of Philippians with St. Paul's advice on how to become happy and how to stay happy. I think we all need that right now, so I'm going to ask all of you as a part of this group to participate within that with me. So, what's the plan? The plan is over the next couple weeks, we are going to build an interior stronghold in our life. The next 2 ways we're going to be doing that is through the Mass and the Lord's Prayer. Those will be the next 2 things I send out to you. And through Habits of Happiness, this Bible study with Father Hilton.